revival that's about to take place. Amen. But we're going to go ahead and sing some songs of worship as we begin our Bible study for this morning. So help me out, sing along, worship God as we get in the spirit of worship. Glory, glory. Glory, glory. Hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down. Glory, glory. Hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down. I feel better. So much better. Since I laid my burden down. I feel better. So much better. Since I laid my burden down. I got peace. Yeah, I got peace and satisfaction. Since I laid my burden down. I've got peace and satisfaction. Since I laid my burden down. Glory, 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 glory. Hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down. Glory, glory. Hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down. I saw the light. Well, I saw the light. I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord. I saw the light, and I saw the light. I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord. I saw the light. Amen. We're going to slow it down. Let's sing that song, Holiness. Holiness, holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness, holiness is what you want from me. Singing righteousness. Righteousness, righteousness is what I long for. Righteousness is what I need. Righteousness, righteousness is what you want from me. So take my heart. So take my heart and form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it to yours, oh Lord. Take my heart, so take my heart and form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it to yours, oh Lord. To yours, oh Lord. To yours, oh Lord. Amen. Glory to God. We want God's will in this place. Amen. If I could have Brother Joshua open us up for Sunday school.
Lord God, we long for your word this day. God, we long for your will to be done. And so, God, be in this place and power, God, bring your words to light this life, this day. And, God, that you would help us through this study. God, we pray for your anointing and presence in Jesus' name.
One, two. Let's try that. All right. Microphone check. Good. Everybody excited about revival this week? Today we're having a great time, and I really am thankful to see all of you. Let's open our Bibles to Ephesians 6. We do bring a great report. Pastor Lamb is here. Amen. And last night I had a great time in fellowship, and certainly he is very excited about coming and being with us this week. I know we're in for an incredible week of ministry. So fasten your seatbelts. We are going to have an awesome time as a church. We'll be getting a report from Dawn regarding the K180 last night and the good events of yesterday. I was very encouraged yesterday morning by the turnout in the prayer room, Saturday morning prayer. That was awesome. Let's keep that going. Let's keep the momentum in prayer. I mean, that to me is the number one thing. When I see God's people early on a Saturday morning, it could be a number of things that you're doing, like sleeping, but that you come out and say, I'm going to pray and I'm going to ask God for his help. We're going to rally as a church in corporate prayer. Can I tell you something? Well done, church. Let's keep that going strong because God is definitely pleased with that. As we look at Ephesians 6, 1 to 4 is our starting point. Let's read that and then we'll dig into today's lesson. Who's got it for us? Sheila, go ahead.
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord.
All right, tremendous thought there. I want to assign some scriptures. Let's go with Proverbs 29. Let me take it. So, Don, Proverbs 29. James 3. On that one. Let's get Marcus and then Kinda, Numbers chapter 30. Let's also go with Matthew 23. Dave, if you would. Josh, if you could grab for us Luke chapter 9. Job 19. Tita, if you would. Thank you. How about James chapter 3 again? Amen. Who would get that? Another one. Ernest, if you would. Let's also get the book of Hebrews chapter 12. Natalie, thank you. So we'll go ahead and go with Adrian on that. Mark chapter 1. Sound, I see a hand in the sound. All right. Roman's going to get that for us. Aspirating our children one more time. Let's avoid doing that, by the way. And somebody give me a working definition of exasperating. What do we mean when we say the word exasperating? I hear that every day. Josh.
Exhausted every effort.
Okay. So if I exasperate my child, that can be included in that. Even more specific, perhaps. Frustrating. All right, good. Ben?
When I'm exasperated, I've reached the limits of my possible,
Okay.
the furthest limits of my capabilities.
All right. So bring all this together. We've got a good working definition, Hans.
Provoking.
Provoking. Irritate intensely. That sounds like Webster over here. All right, good. That's right on. All of you are hitting the nail on the head. To annoy, irritate, or provoke, right? To agitate. Are there a lot of exasperated kids today? Usually they grow up in homes where parents are unsafe, right? Parents that are not doing it God's way, and as a result end up provoking their kids, irritating them, agitating them, all of the above. And so we have a problem here. Most parents are afraid of exasperating their children by being too firm, but most children are exasperated by parents who are not firm consistently. That's a good way to put it. Okay, we're going to go with 25 sure ways to exasperate your children. How's that sound? Sometimes the best way to learn what to do is, first of all, learn what not to do. And 25 surefire ways to exasperate your kids. Are you ready for number one? Number one, top of the list. Every parent be attentive here. Here's the number one thing. You want to exasperate your kids, here's number one. Never admit you are wrong. All right, I don't think we'll have a problem with this one. I hope not anyway. But how many perfect parents are in here? Let me see your hand go up. Let's all see your hand. Right? I'll look and marvel at you. There will be times you'll make mistakes. There will be times you will miss the mark. And guess what? You should never be above apologizing when that happens. Now we hope that it's few and far between, right? Doesn't happen all the time, but on the occasion that you do, have the humility to admit that. So if you want to exasperate your child, here's the number one way. Always be right. Acknowledge no mistakes. Excuse, justify, and rationalize every one of your errors. There are parents that do that. It could be religious. This would be especially dangerous to religious parents. After all, we're Christians, right? I mean, we've got to be right. Well, even we can miss the mark. Proverbs 29. Let's get our reader to take verse number 23 on that.
A man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor.
All right, a man's pride will bring him low. But this will require humility, won't it, church? As parents, we understand that there are times when we make a mistake, and it's a humbling thing, but you know what? That is very, very important. So, good thought there. Let's go to number 2. And after we do 5 of these, I'll open up for comments. We have 25, so we'll have 5 comment opportunities if we get that far. And actually, we'll have an abbreviated session today. I'll give you a little extra time to fellowship and prepare for the revival services, because I want everybody back in the sanctuary ready to go at 2 minutes till, because we're going to establish some dominion this morning. We need to have everyone ready and ready to go. So here's number 2. You want to exasperate your child, model hypocrisy. Hold them to a higher standard than you hold for yourself. Require perfectly of them that which you fail in miserably. Oh boy. Model hypocrisy. Is that going to exasperate your child? It really will, won't it? How about James chapter 3? Let's go ahead and read verse number 17.
But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceful, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy.
All right, so the wisdom that comes from above is without hypocrisy, isn't it? Anybody interested in that wisdom? There's a great list here of what to look for. Purity, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy, good fruits, without partiality. And let's emphasize without hypocrisy. All right, let's apply that there. How about number 3? Fail to keep your promises. You want to exasperate your child, fail to keep your word. Anybody grow up in a home, don't raise your hand necessarily, but grow up in a home where your parent, it's your dad or your mom, we're going to do this. Well, I promise you, I'll take you there. You know, I promise you we'll do this. And they didn't. It's kind of tough, isn't it? Because, I mean, as a child looking up to an adult, fundamental principle of life is keeping the person's word. Parents need to set that example, right? Maybe you grew up in a home where promises were always broken. That's tough. That will exasperate a child. Frustrate them and teach them to mistrust your word by rarely following through on that which you say you will do for them. Parents, you need to avoid that mistake. All right, Numbers chapter 30 and verse number 2.
If a man vows a vow to the Lord, or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth.
All right, here we have in the context of our relationship with God, but I love the terminology. He shall not break what? He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. Just a fundamental principle that we recognize from God's word. And man's word is his bond. It says in the book of Psalms that we're called, before God. Who's going to ascend God's holy hill? He who swears to his own hurt and changes not. Have you ever read that before? Somebody that makes a commitment, then he finds out later this is going to cost him more than he thought. But he keeps his word anyway. Amen?
Yeah.
Sometimes we give our word to people, even our kids, and then we find out later, oh, this is going to be a lot more difficult than I realized. Require a lot more of my time or money or energy. Well, he changes not. And this is a biblical imperative. All right, number 4. 25 sure ways to exasperate your children. Number 4, demand too much of them. Tolerate nothing less than perfection. Catch their every failure and stay on them when they fall short of your perfect standard. Show or know no mercy. Does that happen? Are there parents out there that are way overbearing? I don't think that's the case anywhere here today, but bear that in mind. How about Matthew 23? We get a lesson on this from the Pharisees, don't we? Let's go with verse number 4.
When they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers.
Okay, so there we have a wrong example, and there are parents who follow that and do that. Sadly, that will exasperate children. Number 5, overprotect them. No matter how old they are, limit their freedom and independence. Give them few opportunities to fail. Make all decisions for them without consideration of their feelings or desires. Okay? We know we've got to give our kids opportunities as they progress, as they get older, and overprotecting them is a very real way of exasperating. How about the book of Luke, chapter 9, on that thought? Luke 9, verse 2.
He sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick.
All right, these are disciples, and the principle, one of the great principles of discipleship has to do with the fact that men are going to be released sometimes to fail. And we understand that. Given responsibilities and opportunities that challenge them, and in some cases they don't pass the test, or but I mean, that's part of life. Get back up on our feet and keep going. So not only is that a dynamic of discipleship, but certainly in parenting. Let's start with the first 5 and open up for comments or questions on that. Any thoughts, comments, or input on any of the first 5? I want to really challenge our church. Let's avoid exasperating our kids. Linda.
My daughter, my youngest, she went on a rage, and the Lord told me to apologize to her. She always thinks she's right. And I said, Lord, if I apologize to her, she's going to put my face. If I apologize. I said, Mom, you was right. So I just smiled at her. But I knew, it takes a person to be humble, and to, how you say, when they think you're right, they're not going to say, they're not going to submit if they're wrong. So I just humble myself and told her I apologize.
All right.
So she thought she was right. So one day I told her, just admit you're wrong once in a while, because if your daughter here's carrying influence from you, she's going to think she's always right.
Yes. So Linda here is commenting on number 1 at the top of the list. Parents want to exasperate their kids but never admit that they're wrong. There are times when we are, aren't there? Very legitimate times we need to say to our son or daughter, I'm sorry that I did that. I'm sorry for that. So very good. What else? Any other comments on any of these 5? Dana?
Remember what numbers, but the one about keeping your promises.
Yeah.
Just in general conversation with some of the young people that have been coming to church, you find, oh, my mom said this or that, and then come to find out, that doesn't come to pass. So, talk to them about it, and they're like, yeah, my mom, I never paid any attention. These are their words.
Yeah.
I don't pay any attention to what my mom does, because she always, this or says one thing and then it never comes to pass. So, straight out of their mouth, she lies. She just, she doesn't. It's like it's so heartbreaking.
It is.
And it's not just one kid. It's like I hear it over and over, and it's really very heartbreaking.
Yeah, they're young hearts, they're young minds. They're not quite like some of us that have been around a few years and have become used to human nature, you know, the way it is, and for their own parents to say something, get their expectations built up, and then pull the rug out. It's a tough one. And sometimes we have alcohol involved or drugs, right, and those kind of things. Josh?
You know, I think that kind of concept could make it a little more difficult to understand the truths of God. You know, a lot of the truths of God is promises.
Yep.
And when all you've known all your life is broken promises, then what does another promise mean to me?
Very true.
You know, so it's just that much of a hurdle or obstacle to that we're setting our kids up with to have to overcome. You know, Jesus isn't better than push away.
Yeah, Josh is pointing out that sometimes unpleasant reality, but he's right. Very good thought there. Kid?
I was just gonna say that, like the promises one, kids, like everything that happens to them for the most part might be like a new experience or like really exciting for them because they just, you know, they haven't really experienced anything. And I just remember like when my nephew was a baby, he was so little, but he will remember anything somebody said to him. Like if they told him they were gonna enter the test, he will like never forget. Like days later, like why haven't we done? And yeah, they will always remember that kind of stuff. So you want them to like trust you and to grow up and hold their word too, so they won't be like making false promises.
Yeah. Boy, Kenny's hitting the nail on the head on that. You know, we adults just kind of use words, you know, flippantly, you know, casually, you know, and we forget. Kids, just, you know, they're grabbing onto it, and it really is weighty there.
And I know sometimes even because we're human and our human nature, we still forget that we even made a promise.
Right.
Kids, they will remind us.
They'll remind you. Yep.
Recently, I promised Leilani to take her outside for 15 minutes. And I kind of started trying to do other things, and he made sure she was like, well, we have to go to the park.
Hey.
You know, I'm like, oh, okay, so, you know, made sure I did it.
Good.
Yeah.
That's a true fact right there. Where we're talking about something important, church. These things are important. So the 5 again, never admit you're wrong, model hypocrisy, fail to keep your promises, demand too much of them, and overprotect them. Let's go to the next 5, which would be number 6 to start with. Want to exasperate your child, batter them with words. Rather than responding to misbehavior with appropriate disciplinary actions, habitually lecture them for long periods of time. Aren't you glad this is one of the things that we're really focused on in this course is that we're not doing that. Keep our words at a minimum. Let's just respond calmly the way God called us to. And so batter them with words. Job, chapter 19, and verse number 2. Go ahead.
How long will you torment my soul and break me into pieces with words?
Break me in pieces with what?
Words.
Right? Is that true? Is that an actual reality in life that we can be abused verbally? Surely is, isn't it? And so let's go to the next one with that thought in mind. Verse, number 7 here, abuse them verbally. That's definitely a way to exasperate. Abuse them verbally. Number 7, bark out your orders. Yell at them when they blow it. Let your tone consistently demonstrate harshness. Demean them by name calling, character assassination, and predictions of failure. Swear at them when they tick you off. You heard that from parents before? You heard parents resort to name calling and predictions of failure? Is that significant?
Oh, yeah.
You're going to amount to nothing. You know, you're never going to be anything. You know, things like that. Do they matter? How meaningful is that? I would submit to you that it's extremely dangerous and detrimental. How about James chapter 3? You read the Bible any length of time, we get this theme a lot. Verses 6 through 8.
The tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among the members that it defiles
Who would be willing to play Bible commentator on that passage that Ernest read? There's a lot there. Set on fire by what? In verse 6. Devil would really like to get a hold of our tongue. We'd like to have that as a tool in his hand. And I think in large part we see the events on planet Earth the way they are because the words that people are speaking all over the globe. And wouldn't it be a great thing if we could get this tongue tamed? But James is saying it's not happening. People are just into doing what they want to do with their words, aren't they? We found a man or woman that has this in order. We found someone very special. Right? And I trust that that would mark the Church of Christ, first. It would be our testimony. But even sometimes church folks, we're honest. How hard is it to tame this thing? And how much potential is there for damage? Right? Anyway, let's go to number 8. To exasperate your child, 25 sure ways. Here's number 8. Make discipline too severe. Mete out punishments which are overly harsh for the crime. One of the things we focus on as parents is to make sure that the consequence is proportional to the crime, to the infraction. How many know that's important? Right? Numerous examples we could talk about there, but there are parents that just irritates them when their child does even the smallest thing wrong, and they're running for the rod. I really believe the rod shouldn't be used that often. It's revelation to me, Pastor Joan. Well, receive it. I really don't think it should be used that often. I get it every hour, God. I'll pull that. We're going to get you with that thing, man. There are times it's necessary. And it's done right. It generally curbs behavior for quite some time. But there are parents that are always running for it. And that's a real way to exasperate. Discipline too severe. Number 9, show favoritism towards their brothers or sisters. I wanted to get one more on that tongue of their verbal abuse. Psalm 64, real quick. Let's get our reader there. Psalm 64, verse number 3.
Who sharpen their tongue like a sword, and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, bitter words.
Yeah, very good. All right, so that's another example there. And all throughout the book of Proverbs, we have so many references. So number 6 and 7, very, very important to recognize. So number 9, let's show favoritism towards their brothers or sisters. Surefire way to exasperate our kids. In other words, give unequal disciplines for similar violations. Consistently trust one child over the other. During correction, compare them to their siblings. Respond harshly to one child and sweetly to another for the same infraction. Does that happen?
Yes.
Showing favoritism. The kids pick that up?
Yes.
Is that going to frustrate them? Is that going to exasperate? Here's number 10. Embarrass them. Show them disrespect by scolding or disciplining them in front of others, particularly in front of their teenage friends. Talk openly about their weakness and mistakes to others. You ever heard parents talking about their kids in a public setting? You know, at a time of fellowship? And how does this play out? It's embarrassing them. I think a lot of you remember, hopefully not so much anymore, but especially when you're young, embarrassments are very real. It's like, man, that's the last thing in the world. You'd rather be physically abused than embarrassed. That's, you know, especially for teenagers many times, and so it points that out. So there's the next 5. Any questions or comments on that? We're going through this. We're not sparing any details. We'll be thorough. We do not want to enter into the realm of exasperating our kids. Any one of those strike a chord? There.
I'm sorry, Pastor, to keep.
You're okay. Go right ahead.
when we're talking about it, I remember this video I have of my children. They were very young. My daughter was, I don't know, just a few months old, a couple months old, and I was trying to get video. Now, back then, I didn't have a phone that you could just flip it out and, you know, just start taking video. I had to set up this big old clunky tripod and a camera, and I had to make sure everything, put the tape in, all of that. It was really quite a long process, and I wanted video of my baby girl and my son together.
Yeah.
Now, he was already 4 or 5, he was already 5. And so he was a very curious young man. Some of you know Joe as a little bit older, but so I get everything set up. I got the baby on the bed, and Joe's, you know, he's tooling around, and I'm trying to, you know, my purpose is to get video of the baby and the boy together, and he's going up to the camera and what's this, and you know, and he's very, and I can hear my voice. I'm watching this video years later, 20 years later, and I'm cringing as I'm watching it because my voice is becoming, you know, I can hear myself getting frustrated, get away from the camera, stop, you know, and thank God, I'm not trying to brag here, but thank God I reached a point where in my head I realized that's going to be a funny video in the future because it's his face just, So, you know, I saw the point at which I realized, okay, my goal is, you know, I got to let go of that goal because it's just going to be my son's face right in the, and it actually was quite funny after I realized that I let that go. And I actually did get video of the baby girl and the boy together.
That's good. Yes.
So it's when you have to catch yourself. That's the trick when it comes to that exasperation. When you're, and I know that we're talking about exasperating the kids, but if I had continued and told him get away from there, and that would have exasperated him. He was just a curious little 5-year-old boy, you know. Is this am I on the you know, the whole video is, am I on this tape now?
Right.
And really,
You gotta catch
really
yourself,
have,
don't you?
yeah,
Boy,
mess
that's
it
a
up.
true fact. Very good. Very good. Anyone else on any of these 5 particularly?
I was thinking about number 7.
Yep.
Because
Verbal
I just
abuse.
happened to read a story. That's an inspiring story. And it was about a guy who made false accusations. Made the guy go ahead and go to court. He got accused of something he never did. But got acquitted because he was innocent. And because of what he did, he went to court. Judge told him, before I pass any type of sentence, I want you to write all the words you said about him. Then I want you to tear it up in little pieces. As you go home, I want you to throw it out the window.
Whoa.
And then come to me again the next morning. So he did exactly what he said. Came back the next morning. And he said, did you do what I told you to do? Every word that you said about that man, did you go ahead and write down? So he did exactly what he said. Tore it up, threw it out the window. Next thing he said, good, now I want you to go out and look for those. Bring them up. And he said, I can't find those are gone. And exactly, just like your words, it's gone. You can't take them back from what you said.
Yeah.
So he was using that as an analogy, and you said that, I'm like, wow, it's just like that story, Rick. Because every time we say something wrong, it leaves a scar, it injures, and you can't take it back.
Can't take it back.
Once it's done, it's done. So the only thing you can do is fix the present, but you can't fix the past. So the words are gone, the past.
But what Ernest is saying is definitely a great admonition to us today, isn't it? Because we need to understand that. Before you just speak out those words, parent, remember, like Ernest is saying, there's no way to bring it back. And once those words are out there, how many know? For all we know, the child carries it a lifetime, right? Always thinking about that. They said that. That's heavy. That's serious. So let's let that be a warning for the future. We know we can't do anything in the past. Aren't you glad for the blood of Jesus? And parents can be helped. Very good thought there, She.
I brought up this example when we were talking about the tongue in the Friday night Bible study. Years ago, there was a sister in the church that was constantly, no matter who was around, I mean, in front of her children, constantly, I need a break. I just need a break from you. I need a break. I need a break. In front of her children. And one day I took her aside and said, how would you feel if your husband spoke to you about needing spoke about needing a break from you?
Yep.
I can't imagine how your kids must feel of always being a burden.
Boy, well said. And, I've seen that too, Sheila. You know, it always has troubled me because it's like they're like the parent is completely oblivious to the dynamics that are happening right there. And the kids are taking this in. Good thought there. I want to move to number 11 now. We're talking about surefire ways to exasperate your children. Of course, we want to speak these things out so we can avoid doing these things. Number 11, give no time warnings. When they are in the middle of a fun activity, never give advance warning that it's time to end it. Regularly wait until the last minute and demand them to immediately stop whatever they are doing. All right? Can you see how that would exasperate?
All right.
Gotta think ahead, parent. Be ahead of the game on that. And that's important. Here's number 12. It's an interesting thought. To exasperate your child. Number 12, try to be their buddy. That's my son, he's my best friend. You know, my daughter, she's my best bud. Well, I understand, you know, the affection and, you know, but they're not. They never will be. They're your child. And there is a distinction here. Strive to be their parent and their pal at the same time. Tease, chat, and play with them like a peer one moment, and then step into your superior role to exercise adult authority the next. Permit them to show disrespect to you, teasing you, correcting you, playfully calling you names, and then turn around and exercise firm authority over them in some matter. Allowing them such over-familiarity will frustrate them, because they will be made to feel like equals and subordinates. The insecure parent who needs his children's approval will find his children despising him. Children innately need their parents to be leaders and not followers. Amen. Give them some security. I'm not saying you don't have fun with your child. You need to have a good time with them. There needs to be times of blessing and enjoyment. But how many know it always needs to be understood you're in charge. All right. Number 13. So bear these in mind. I'm going to get to number 15. We'll open it up and we'll be finished here because I'll give you a little extra time. Here's number 13. Withhold firm discipline and proper training. All right, the lack of clear boundaries will make them insecure in your love. Responsibility they will bear in overseeing and making decisions for your family will produce in them anxiety too great for their emotional maturity. They need firm discipline and proper training. Do not withhold that from them. How about Hebrews 12? Verses 6 through 8. Get our reader there. Go ahead.
For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons.
All right, so every son who the father receives, what's the mark of their sonship, if you will? Go back to the first part of what Natalie read. Yeah. Whom the father loves, he scourges every son who he receives. So this is a mark being received, isn't it? Being legitimate. We don't like that word. The King James uses the stronger term, right? We'll leave it there. But we have to give firm discipline and proper training. Number 14, discipline inconsistently. We have touched on this at length, and I'm glad about that. To exasperate your child, discipline inconsistently. Number 14. Most parents are afraid of exasperating their children by being too firm. But most children are frustrated by parents who are not firm consistently. Enforcing rules inconsistently sets unclear boundaries, which beg to be violated. It is also like giving them occasional permission to disobey. The temptation to risk violating your standards leaves them insecure and anxious. It's an interesting thought. If you make a rule, enforce it. Otherwise, your kids will, quote, stress out trying to figure when to take you seriously. Okay? And then number 15 is assert parental authority weekly. W-E-A-K-L-Y. Not only will you exasperate your kids with inconsistent discipline, but you will frustrate them by sending mixed messages. With your lips you will say no, and that's final, but you will permit them to bring up the subject over and over, and you may eventually cave in. Your word draws a line, but you allow them to step over it. Parents whose limits are not firm allow their children to partially shoulder responsibility for running the home, a job for which they have not been equipped. They are always planning, plotting, and scheming. Ever seen that in the little one's eye? Mm-hmm. There is no rest for the child who is always testing their parents. That's an interesting thought. No rest for the child who is always testing their parents to see how far they can be pushed. Have you met that child before? All right, so there's 10 to 15, those 5. Any closing comments or thoughts on those? You have to just stay tuned for the next 10. Next Sunday we'll get it. Good job.
I had 2 bosses at the same time one time in the Navy, when I was in the Navy, and one, opposite sides of the spectrum. So one was, we called him the Shank, because he had an edge.
The Shank.
The Shank.
Okay.
Because he had an edge, and like, he expected us to know the instructions, the book, and he enforced them, like, to the letter. And so if there was anyone in the division that broke a rule or something like that, then you could expect, you could, just like you could set your time to the rising and the setting of the sun, you could expect that there was going to be consequences. Yep. And this same guy, though, he was very fair, so everybody knew that, if you went by the rules, then life was going to be good. If you didn't go by the rules, life was going to be bad. So the other guy didn't know where he was coming from, what he was doing. On the one hand, he was everyone's friend, inviting everybody over to his house to get drunk, even the minor, even the ones that are underage. And on the other hand, he's over there trying to be, leading petty officer. This is what needs to be done. How come you didn't do this? And overlook other things that he should have been taking care of. And so it was real kind of chaotic. So now on the one hand, I noticed some dynamics. And I could go into just all these different dynamics between these two and the way people responded to their leadership. But just a few things that are pertinent to this situation here. On the one hand, with the Shank, everybody respected him extremely. Yeah. Extremely. And including the ones getting in trouble by him, they respected him.
There you go, insight. Yeah.
The other one, while everybody was friendly when he wanted to be buddy-buddy, nobody respected him. And when he was around, everybody talked behind his back and literally just talked that he had no credibility. So in terms of obedience, the guy who everyone respected, people followed the rules because they wanted to make him proud. Versus this guy, people followed the rules because they were afraid of maybe catching his bad side one day. And that's just probably a pretty good example for
I would
parents,
say it is.
think.
I would agree. It's a great way to end it. Great thought there. I want to just encourage you, lock in on these insights because they really are important. It's possible we could exasperate our kids, isn't it? Yeah. Let's avoid these dangers. As our heads are bowed, we're going to go ahead and let you get a little early start to the fellowship this morning. Make sure you welcome in visitors. We've had a great push this week in evangelism. We're excited about a great day and great week ahead of us in revival. It'll be an awesome time. Let's pray and ask God to visit us and bless us, have his way in our lives. We're very, very grateful we can come together today and have a tremendous revival meeting. Let's ask God's blessing. Ask if Hans would pray.
God, we thank you for this Bible study this